In today's video, we're talking about what they don't tell you about living here in Utah. Now look guys, I've made a ton of videos here on the channel. I think I'm probably at about 150, maybe even 200 videos here on the channel. So I've talked a lot about what it's like to work, eat, sleep, live, and play here along the Wasatch Front. But for me, having grown up here, I have a very different perspective than somebody who is moving here for the very first time. Maybe they've been here for 6 months or 12 months, and they're gonna discover some things that they didn't know about the state. In this video, I'm gonna cover about 10 different things that people told me, hey, I did not know it was gonna be like this when I first moved out there. I think this is really good information because for me, having grown up here, I think that what I talk about here on this channel with these videos is probably a little bit biased to my own perspective and to my own experiences here living in Utah. So because of that, I actually decided to interview some of my clients who I've helped move here to the state. And I asked them, I said, hey, what are some things that you didn't know about living here in Utah that you wish you would have known before that we can then go out and tell people so that they have a better idea of what to expect when they move here. Now, I've made this video before. We're going to be covering all brand new topics here in this video. You can find that other video on my channel if you want. It's called What They Don't Tell You About Living in Utah. So you can go check that out. There will be a link in the description box below or up here on either side of the video. You'll see it pop up and you can click it there as well. Now, these people that have moved here are from all across the country. Some of them are even international. We've had people from the West Coast move here. We've had people from the East Coast move here, and they all have different things to say. The cool thing about this is these are all people who reached out to me and said, hey, Cody, I'm moving to your area. I need some help. And they ended up using me as their real estate agent to purchase a home here in Utah. So if that leads me to my next point, if you're thinking about making that move yourself, reach out to me. My information's here on the screen. Shoot me an email. I'd love to chat with you about the type of home and lifestyle that you're looking for when it comes to making a move here to Utah. Or even if you live here, locally and you're looking at purchasing a home, reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you and see how we can make that a reality. Okay, so as we jump into this, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to living here in Utah. When I reached out to people, I said, hey, lay it all out for me. Tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, and let's have a chat about it so we can inform other people here on the channel. So we're actually going to be reading this off of my phone here together. I'm actually going to pull up the notes that I wrote for this video and run through this with you. So let's go ahead and jump into number one. Now, the first one here on our list is actually going to be somewhat of a negative. This one says, hey, the food is subpar and it's not great. It's a little bit more expensive than where we came from, which was the South. They said it's about 20 to 30% more expensive. And they said that there's not a lot of mom and pop type shops. Now, this is interesting because I actually heard this from numerous people saying, hey, in my area, there's not a lot of mom and pop shops. There's not a lot of nicer, higher end places. There's just not a ton of options. It's mostly fast food. It's mostly franchise type stuff. And it's just kind of the stuff that you're going to see everywhere else. And I do have to agree with that. You really do kind of have to seek out some of those more unique one-off type places because it does seem like it gets very repetitive. There's going to be a McDonald's on every corner and Arby's and, a chicken shop, whatever it might be. There's going to be one of each of those on pretty much just about every corner. So finding something where you can find some really unique, good food that somebody is making, especially if it's, from another part of the world, it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that here in Utah. Now, on this note, I do have to say that if you're in the downtown area, there's going to be a lot of options. There's a lot of one-off restaurants in the downtown area or even the suburbs surrounding it that are going to be what we're talking about here, right? They're going to be the one-off shops, the mom and pop type places that are going to have a really good food. But as you get further out, as you go into Utah County or even up into Davis and Weber County to the north, you are going to lose some of that variety. And so it can be a little bit difficult to find really good, high quality food. Now, the next one that I actually heard people talk about here is that there's a lot of friendly people in the area. Neighbors are very friendly, and there's a lot of friendly people at restaurants and a lot of friendly people at the grocery stores or the parks or wherever you go, right? It's a very common thing here in Utah for people to just kind of, hey, wave to each other, say hi, smile, whatever it might be. That just seems to be something that's kind of ingrained here in our culture. Having grown up here, it seems totally normal for us to do that. But for somebody coming from another city, especially big cities, they're going to look at that and say, whoa, this is like kind of weird. I've had a ton of people comment on this. In fact, it's probably one of the most common comments that I get from somebody when they come here is they say one of two things. They say, I can't believe how clean it is, and I can't believe how friendly everybody is. So that's something that we do get a lot. People don't realize how friendly other people are here. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you're not going to get, a grumpy Gus every once in a while who just, is having a bad day and is going to treat you poorly. But for the most part, people here are generally pretty happy and pretty friendly. Next up, we've got number three. There's a lot to do here. I had multiple people respond to me and say, hey, it's easy to get outside. outside for hiking, sports events, shopping, winter sports, summer sports, whatever you're trying to do, it's extremely easy to get outside, whether you're going 5 minutes down the street to the park, or you're going to drive an hour to the ski resort or an hour to Park City or something like that. There's a ton to do, and it's relatively easy to do so. And for the most part, it's free, right? If you want to go mountain biking, it's free. If you want to go hiking, it's free. If you want to go rock climbing, it can be free, other than buying the stuff to get started, right? But when you go out and do those activities, it's easy to do and it's relatively free to do so. That's a really cool thing I love about living here in Utah is you have access to this. And again, for me, having grown up here, I get kind of just, used to it. I get a little bit jaded with just having so much easy access to basically any outdoor activity that you want to do. Next up on our list, we actually have another negative one here, which is that it gets very windy. This is something that's actually more specific, especially to the Saratoga Springs area. I've talked about this a couple times on other Saratoga Springs specific videos. It's one of the best areas, but you do have to know that it does get pretty windy out there. I think this is for a couple reasons. Number one, it's pretty exposed. And number two, you're on a hillside right next to the lake. And so you do get a lot of wind coming kind of over the mountain and kind of up across that lake. And there's not a lot to stop that wind, right? You don't have a lot of vegetation, you don't have the big mature trees, the big, shrubs or anything like that. So you do get a lot of wind that kind of rip through that area. I will also add that this year was more windy than normal. There was actually a few news reports that said, hey, if you think it's been windy this year, you're actually right. It's not usually that windy, but this is something that we did experience this year. It was more windy than it usually is. And that is specific to the Saratoga Springs area. So I know a lot of people are looking at that area. So I wanted to bring that up here on this video. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit more about weather here. We're actually going to talk about the fall weather. So this time of year, we're actually, just moving into winter. And I had two people actually comment back and say, hey, I thought we were supposed to have 4 seasons here, right? It seems like we only had 3. What happened to the fall? Yeah, it's not really existent. Having grown up here, that's something that I've always kind of disliked about the, quote unquote 4 seasons that we get here in Utah is it seems to go from summer to winter very quickly. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, it was like 75, 80 degrees outside. And then all of a sudden it's like 30 degrees and raining. It seems to happen very quickly. The fall month is really, you might get like the last week of September, and then in October, we had snow before Halloween, right? So you can definitely go past that fall month or, that fall time frame really quickly, and you don't really get to experience that like you do in other parts of the country. So that's one thing that's kind of a downside. Spring is a little bit better. You do get to experience that. You probably get 2, maybe 2.5 months worth of spring weather before you get into summer. But as you go from summer to fall to winter, those fall months do move pretty quickly. Like I said, it feels like you only get like a couple weeks really of that night. Next up, let's talk about one that I wanted to add here. Interestingly enough, only one person mentioned this specific thing. Now, this is something I get asked a lot about, but as people move here, I don't think it's as big of a deal as people actually think it's going to be when they're researching what it's like to live here in Utah. So out of all the people that I had respond to me, only one person mentioned the air quality. They said, hey, I wish the air quality here was a little bit better, but it's still not as bad as what we experienced in California. So in California, they were experiencing worse air quality than we have here in Utah. Of course, we wish it could be better. I think that's something that everybody would want, but it's not as bad as what they were experiencing in the past. So I think this is true. When people, reach out to me, they say, hey, I've heard about the inversion. I've heard about the bad air quality. What do I need to know about this? And I think it's something that's worth considering. It's worth learning about and knowing what that's going to entail if you make that move here. But I don't think that it's actually something that's quite as big of a deal as a lot of people make it out to be. Now, that might just be my own personal opinion. Again, having grown up here, I've gotten used to it. On those days where the air quality is not great outside, you try to stay indoors so you can kind of let those air filters on your furnace system filter that out. But, for the most part, I don't think that it's any worse than any other major city out there. So yeah, we'd love for it to be better, but it's not as bad as a lot of people think it is. Now, number 7 here on our list, this is something I had a couple people mention that they really like, especially having come from other parts of the country where this is not the case. They said, hey, most of the cities here are going to be areas with newer, bigger homes that all look really nice and they're extremely safe areas. Crime is low in these areas, and compared to what they're used to in these other big cities, it's night and day difference, right? They move out here, they're like, there's no trash on the ground. There's not a ton of graffiti. Yeah, we do have graffiti, in certain areas, but a lot of these newer areas like Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, Draper, Harriman, Sandy, Riverton, South Jordan, whatever it might be. There's not a lot of that going on. There's not a lot of crime, not a lot of graffiti. It's extremely clean. You're going to get bigger, newer, nicer homes. It's going to be basically suburban type living, which I think a lot of people really appreciate. Some people will kind of be like, oh, suburbs, suburbs. But for the most part, I think it's something that people really, really appreciate. Next up on our list, number 8 here. This is something that I thought was good, and I wanted to add it in here because I do get asked about this a lot as well. And actually the number 1 video that I have here on the channel is kind of talking about this, right? So that's going to be the LDS community. So this is a good one. Almost every single person who moves here asks me, hey, what is this like? What am I going to experience on a day-to-day basis? How's it going to affect me? How will it affect my kids? What do I need to know about this, right? I think a lot of people go into it thinking, hey, this is going to be kind of in your face. It's going to be just all over. You're going to just feel it every single day. And I don't know that that's really the case here. It is a big part of the culture here, obviously, because Utah was kind of founded around that whole religion. It is a very big part of the state culture still, and it does have a big influence on what happens here in the state, but I don't think it's as prominent as many people believe it to be, especially when looking in from the outside. Once they move here, they realize, oh, it's not actually that big of a deal. People are not going to be bugging me on a regular basis about this. So actually for me, having been raised here in the state and actually being born into a Mormon family, I was actually raised within that, church religion for a number of years. And then at about 16, I was like, hey, this is not for me. And I haven't been back to church since, but it hasn't really affected me. I've gotten to the point now where I almost don't even notice it. I mean, yeah, it's there, but I just feel so accustomed to it that it doesn't really affect me on a day-to-day basis. And I think you'd probably feel the same way after living here for, a couple months, or maybe even a couple years. Next up, we're going to jump into number 9 here, and then we're going to go into a miscellaneous fire round. I'm just going to really quickly fire off some of the different things, some of the miscellaneous items that people actually talked about. So number 9, we actually had a couple of people mention this. They said, hey, it can be a little bit challenging to meet friends if you're not in church, right? If you're not going to a church on a regular basis, it can be a little bit hard to kind of meet adult friends, right? You don't have that outlet like you would at church or school where you could actually go and meet people. So sometimes you get lucky, you meet really good people that live in your neighborhood, you get really good neighbors, but I do agree. I think it can be a little bit difficult to, meet friends, especially when there's, if you're not a part of those big major events that happen on a regular basis. It can be a little bit more difficult for that to happen, especially if you're, kind of used to living in a city or something. I think that's something worth considering. If you're expecting to come out here and just, make a whole bunch of friends, you're probably going to want to be in the downtown area because that's going to be more socially acceptable, I guess, if you will, or you just got to hope that you get some really good neighbors and you meet some really good people that kind of live in your neighborhood. So that's something that I've kind of noticed. Luckily for me, having grown up here, I know a lot of people, so I haven't personally seen that, but I could see why somebody moving in from out of state would have that difficulty. All right, so let's go into this little fire round here. Let's talk about some miscellaneous things. So these are kind of just one-off things that people mentioned. Number 1 was the higher elevation affects how you bake food. Number 2, you need a lot of lotion for your dry skin due to the lack of humidity here. If you're moving from a humid area, maybe it's the East Coast, maybe it's the South, maybe it's the West Coast, you are going to experience that low humidity here, and that's going to be an adjustment for you. Again, for me, having grown up here, I've never known anything different. It's like culture shock when I go somewhere where it's super humid. So, you will need some lotion, especially if you're not used to it. Street numbers. This is a really good one. So this is something that is pretty funny. When it comes to saying the street numbers here in Utah, especially in like Salt Lake County, or even just any of the counties really, but it's most prominent in Salt Lake County. It's going to be an adjustment for you because you're going to have streets that are, let's say, 12,000 south, right? You might have the street number might be 12000 south, but people are going to say, hey, that's 120th south, right? Or you might have like a really popular one is like 10,600 south, which means 106 blocks south of Temple Square downtown, right? So we would say 106 south rather than 10,600 south. So this is something that's different. A lot of people don't understand this at first, but once you get used to it, it actually does get pretty easy. Next up, lack of grocery store options. We do mostly have kind of just your big chain, regional, local grocery stores here. There's not a lot of options when it comes to that. You kind of just have, might maybe have 2 or 3 options in your area, and that might be about it. People also mentioned aggressive drivers. People like to drive quick here. If you're not driving 80 on the freeway, you're holding up traffic. At least that's, a lot of people look at it here. And lastly, there's lots of stores that are closed on Sundays and weekends are relatively quiet. So that kind of wraps up our list here, guys. I know we covered a lot here. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment down in the comment section below. It lets us know that we're making the right videos that you want to see. And also, I'd love to hear your opinion about this. If you live here in the area, what is it about this area area that you didn't expect, or, you know, what are your thoughts on this whole subject, right? I'd love to hear that. And also don't forget to share this video with a friend or a family member, a spouse maybe, who's interested in this type of content. Last, before I let you go, make sure to reach out to me, call, text, or email anytime. If you're thinking about making a move here, I would love to help you. I want to be your trusted real estate resource when it comes to moving here in, moving here to Utah. I've helped people from all across the world make a move here, and I cannot wait to help you do the same exact thing. So with all that being said, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.